What movie did we just watch?
The Woman in the Yard,
And what are we doing today?
a movie review.
Alright. So I'm gonna start this off with saying something that really needs to be kind of important said before we go on. And that is that this movie is about suicide awareness. And this one should be a little warning ahead that we may bring up those topics. So how do you think that the beginning went?
The beginning, I know I'm comparing apples and oranges, and I'm probably making this comparison because not long before we saw Minecraft, this I feel like, I felt like that the story was a lot easier to follow. And so, so I was able to, know who the characters are, know what the story is, and and not wonder what in the world is even going on. So I definitely felt like that it really set up the mood well, just with the camera angles and especially with actually seeing, the title character, it definitely set up that mood.
I agree with that a little bit. I know that for me, I didn't really understand what the movie was about right away in the beginning. It was kind of confusing because we just had a woman in the yard. We didn't really know a whole lot about what was going on. But I do like that we got some background throughout the movie. We got some understanding of things from the background. Um, so it was good in the balance of getting things going. But I think it could have been a little more rewritten a little bit to give us a little more description of what that woman was, but it kind of gave it still the spookiness of what is this person? Why are they here?
Yeah, and I mean, if you were to put yourself in the character's shoes, I mean, if you saw like some lady like that, just sitting there, just looking directly at you in your own yard in front of your own house, knowing that your house is supposed to be a place where you feel safe, but then knowing that that person's there, just and she's not moving, she's just looking right at you. I mean, I would be pretty scared too.
It definitely we didn't know where she came from. We didn't know what she was. All we could tell that she was darker color skin and that she was wearing a black cloak in a chair and she just showed up. We had no clue what she was there for. So we got so little information. And whenever the mom went out to speak to her, she was speaking riddles in a sense, almost giving no information, but wanted her to figure it out. And it was a very suspicious and very also kind of making it where it's ooh, this is kind of odd. But the thing that she did say that got me off guard is I'm here because you asked me to be here. That threw me off huge. Because when did she ask for something like this to happen? And I like that it came up throughout the movie that why she was there. And I think it gave off good uh a good background over time.
Yeah, and so about the whole thing about how we don't really know a whole lot. This is what a lot of horror movies do, and ultimately, a lot of people will a lot of people will concur that this is one of the things that made Halloween work.
Yes.
Is that you don't know the full backstory of Michael Myers, and all that you needed to know was that he had the blackest eyes, and you didn't really need to know a whole lot about Michael Myers. It's because the less that you know, the more terrifying that it is. And I mean, imagine if you're in your own home and then you would then hear like that someone's walking and all that. What is scarier is that you don't know who it is
Yeah.
versus if you know as to who it is, and now say, if I know it's my mom or my dad or my brother, sister, whichever, I'm going to be at peace knowing that's somebody who I know, somebody who I trust. But if I don't know,
Yeah, it definitely leaves that open to what's going on here.
mhm.
Um, what do you think about the overall story of the movie? Like from the beginning to the end, what do you think about like the whole entire aspect of it, about how it went and the overall storytelling?
So, in my own opinion, I feel like the first act and the second act definitely were better than the third act with how it wrapped up. I see where they're trying to get at. It's just I just feel like that the third act was the weakest, you know, well, like of all the acts in the movie.
Yeah,
You know, I left the theater feeling underwhelmed like by the third act.
yeah. I definitely felt that once we knew what the story was ultimately going to say and what it was actually going to be about, I think it definitely died off. I think we kind of lost the scare factor of it once we figured out what the overall was. I personally never cried during a horror movie until I realized what this story was. Once I realized this story was literally about someone having depression and suicidalness after a major accident, losing her husband, that she felt tremendously about her fault. It definitely changes the overall feel of the movie. And I think it entirely changed from it being scary to being, wow, this person is fighting an inner demon. This isn't, a demon coming into their home. It's about the demon that's in herself.
Mm-hmm.
She's fighting it.
Yeah, and now that I definitely really liked about the movie is because that's something what you know everybody knows that feeling like of having to battle yourself, and especially with big topics like suicide and
Mhm.
and all that.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, and I mean it's a message that definitely needs to be heard. So.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that, you know, not everyone experiences depression and suicidalness as throughout their daily life in such an intense form. A lot of people deal with, those emotions. And then there's people that deal with it on a chronic and a lot more severe level. And as someone that deals with those frequently, I actually really connected to this movie. And I think it helps a lot of people see what people like me that have dealt with depression and suicidal, what they go through regularly. This is a constant battle that a lot of people go through, and I think it brings a lot of awareness to it.
And I just thought of this since that the characters do live in a house, like that is pretty far away, like
Mm-hmm.
from a lot of people. If you isolate yourself, it both adds to the horror of this movie,
Absolutely.
but at the same time, it also makes sense as to for the main character, like for their mental health.
Yeah, and you can see the mental health of the mom not being there entirely full in the beginning. You can tell that she lost a family member and she was upset about it, but it wasn't really known what all really was going on, and it gave us little pieces here, little pieces there, and we were actually slowly developing the story of this is a story about depression, and I think it's really great. So you mentioned the third act was kind of a little underwhelming. Why
Yes.
is that?
I just felt like that the script, it just, you know, I'm trying to put my finger on why. It's just I just felt like a lot of the horror, like it just started to lose a lot of the tension because, in my own opinion, I see what they're trying to get at. With her battling herself, I just feel like that they should have, I think that they should have like had the title character, be like covered up in those, and like that gown and all that a little bit more. Because I kind of feel like that
Yeah,
kind of took away from the horror, and it's just it's hard to put my fingers on why. It's just I just felt like the script got a little bit scattered and all over the
yeah.
place by then. So
I definitely felt that a lot of the horror factor was lost at third act.
definitely,
Like it definitely dropped down dramatically. And I think it's partially because we knew the story, and secondly, the character was no longer the same. I remember watching, like, for the most part, is watching the trailer. It seemed like it was going to be a shadow that does most problems, but they quickly learned closing the blinds, and that solved the issue. So that was kind of like solved the issue of the shadow. But that's as far as the trailer went. So this whole another aspect of actually having a person in the house, but we also noticed that, certain features brought her saying, after not to log into it, we realized she was the demon. It was herself that was actually the demon that was outside. It was her that came into the house. She was doing all this. It was not an actual external force. And I think that's what brought the scare factor down. Not having, a external thing attacking or doing all this. It was herself doing it. And I think that brought in, a whole different feeling to it, but also took out the scare factor because it wasn't an external force.
yeah, and also even watching the film itself. I mean, all of us saw it in theaters at the same time.
Yeah.
Every actor all always played.
It definitely, like, it allows a culture to feel represented.
Yeah, yeah,
Represented. And that's a very important thing to have.
it is.
We're starting to go into this area where, people don't like seeing different cultures, it seems like. And I think this definitely breaks that apart. We're starting to see more of a broader sense because you look back back in the day, we had blackface for actors, where
We
people
did.
where people painted themselves black to play those roles, and it's nice seeing the representative of the actual race. But also, I like to see a horror movie or another movie that actually has a disabled character that's played by a disabled person. We don't see that a whole lot, and it'd be nice to actually start seeing that again. And start seeing that again, but from now on.
The only one that I can think of off the top of my head where they did do it
Back
in A Quiet Place 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in A Quiet Place 1 and 2, they actually did have a deaf girl, like, who like her character, like, was deaf.
Yeah.
And even the actress herself also is.
Yeah.
Which makes sense for the character. I mean, I'm sure that there are more horror films out there where they
Back in the day. Back.
where they had that.
Yeah. And I feel like the movie with it having the different culture than what we typically always see, bringing that in, and it's kind of bringing in a better, more broader culture sense. So I think that's really important that we see in film today, is seeing that broader cultural differences. Um, so we're kind of getting to the end of this, so we're kind of end this pretty soon here. So, what was your opinion of the overall film?
Uh, I thought it was okay. I mean, it was good, but I feel like it could have been better. I mean, if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I think I would give it a 3.
I would rate it around 4 myself. I liked the overall meaning behind it.
I also did.
I liked the cast. The cast did a really good job.
Oh, absolutely,
They
yeah.
really did. I think that overall it could have had a little bit better of a story, but I think the overall meaning of the movie was very well rounded.
Yep.
And I think the actors did great. You see the cast set and everything that went on. They had good lighting. They had overall good presentation of it. I think it just could have been slightly better.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. Although that you were more kind with your rating.
Yes.
than mine. So
I don't typically give horrible ratings unless if it was horrible. So, but I'm
yeah.
also not the hugest critic. The film that we just reviewed brought up the topic of suicidal ideation and depression. And here at Sit Down by the Fire, we want you to know that you do matter. We want you to know that no matter what goes on in your life, you do matter to us and everyone. No matter what anyone says, your life is valuable. If you feel like you're in a crisis, call 988 if you're in the United States or reach out to a crisis line in your location.